There is an old saying. It says that each of us have two countries to ourselves. One where we are born, and the other one will eventually find us. We just need to keep our eyes open, and I kept mine, and the country found me. That was France. Every time I traveled to France, my head and heart probably both wondered if I was ever French in one of my past lives. I have this strange, though so beautiful, a connection with everything that's French. Being a traveler, history fascinates me the most. History lives forever, but what keeps changing is how we perceive history through our own sentiments. This is when I was looking into the chapters of the French Liberation in 1944. If we look back to the history of women's fate, it had mostly been the darkest. A price that women had to always pay for being a race so beautiful, for being a race so tolerant, and for being a race so judged no matter what. No, I'm not a feminist, but an equalist, and yes, like most women, I often wonder what God must have had in his mind when he was creating us. There was something beyond their facets of victory that caught my attention. The fate of women accused of sleeping with the enemy. Collaboration Horizontale. My research on France during the World War II of the Nazi occupation in Europe brought me a lot of pain. This was a period of mass kidnapping conducted in French and Polish cities with the aim of capturing young women for sexual slavery. Women were kidnapped by German soldiers for prostitution. The German command turned the hotels into brothels for their officers, where hundreds of women were dragged mercilessly down by the streets by their arms and hair. Brothels soon became home for these French women, and accepting this life was their only choice. Most of the times, it was a compromise that these women made to survive. Their compromise not only fed them food, but also luxury at the time when the whole of their country was tearing apart by fear, hunger, and death. These girls were adjusting to a life that the world outside the brothels only detested through hatred and anger. It was a difficult time for judgment. Either part of the world were right on their part of rage. The ones who were hungry and dying, and the ones who chose to eat and survive. At the same time, in between all the compromises and rage, some of the German soldiers were also falling in love with these French women. And these love stories were beyond the war. But history always had its own mission. After 5 years of war, the World War II came to an end in the year 1944. Soon, the liberated French were rounding up the women collaborators for public humiliation. Men who volunteered to work in German factories were also captivated, but women almost always were the first targets. Altogether, 20,000 women were known to have marched down to this further act of cruelty as a punishment by the French. But the true number may be well higher than 80,000 women. During the same time, there were these resistance leaders in Paris who tried to make severe effort to stop the public acts of humiliation. But then, there were also these leaders who had more strength to encourage the anger in the youth to continue the torture on these women. Their heads were shaved off. And these women were often paraded through the streets on the back of the lorries. These women were beaten inhumanly and were forced to run naked, daubed with tar. They were often marked with swastikas and paints. Some of them were even shot to death. This misogynistic reaction was actually the revenge on women, almost worse than rape. Isn't it an irony that even history reassures women had mostly been condemned as the ugly part of negotiations made by the world of men?